So welcome everyone. Let's get started. We are having two presentations for today. Welcome to our Codex Group Meeting, and it's first we have Maria Tzevelekou and Mikhail
Yeah.
Tzevelekou. Sorry for my poor Greek here, but they are the co-founders of Draco, and I think you're siblings, right? You're brother and sister.
Yeah.
Correct. Yes.
Great. And one of you, I think, Mikhail, you are like a lawyer, and Maria is a technologist, and
Yeah,
so
that's right. That's right. Yeah.
a great legal innovation family in a way.
Right.
So anyway, we'll hear from you about the AI system that you have built for the Greek judicial system. Well, over to you, Maria and Mikhail.
All right. Awesome.
Okay, great. So I'm Maria, as you mentioned.
Uh,
And
I'm Michael. I practice law, and Maria is an engineer.
yeah, I'm currently a student at the Electrical and Computer Engineering School at the National Technical University of Athens. And we're basically building together this program, which is called Draco. And we're saying it's 2000 days, 2 minutes, trying to accelerate Greek legal justice using AI and using these modern tools. So the premise of building this actually was from firsthand experiences here, as Mike has
Right.
also done.
So really, I came up with this idea initially and brought it to Maria when I was working as a law clerk when I was in law school. And at the time, I was doing a lot of very clerical and repetitive work, and very little actual law. Most of my days I would just have to sift through all this unorganized data and try to make sense of it so we can build some arguments. And really, that was at the time where AI had just begun just to take off. And the first it was at the time where ChatGPT had become quite popular. And so I was try to like play around with it and see how I can make this clerical aspect of my work go faster so that I can actually practice some law. And so, that's what kind of, we got together and came up with this plan.
Yeah. So I also examined the problem more widely in Greece. So we're going to show you actually what the problem looks like from a first-hand perspective as well. So the problem is that millions of legal documents are computationally invisible. So these pictures that you see here are from the Athens District Court. And these are all just case files, judicial decisions, everything all in stacks of documents that are just built and built and built, just paper. And Greece is the lowest in Europe for digitalization in the legal sector, according to EU statistics from 2024. And specifically, money laundering cases were completed after an average of 2,000 days, which is 5.5 years, compared to the average of around 2.5 to 3 years in the rest of the European countries. So as you can see, there's clearly it's an issue, but it's also an aspect and a gap where that can have a change.
To put in perspective, the image you see in your screen, a judge will have to take one of those large case files you see, take it to their house because most of them work from their house or their office. Physically have to read through all the filings, the evidence, and everything. Type out the data for any files they have, and try to come up with a judgment. And so, really, that's the problem we're trying to tackle here.
Yeah. So the Greek legal problem, we have three aspects. One is we have 7+ disconnected source systems per query. So we have legal materials that are spanning both online and hard copies from Supreme Court archives, the Council of State, administrative courts, private databases, physical only archives, and there's no unified query interface that actually exists. We have 90% of the working time on information retrieval, which we did interviews based on Supreme Court judges, the administrative court judges, also lawyers at mid-tier and higher law firms. And that's also because most of the documents exist as scanned PDFs, unstructured text, handwritten text as well. And it's relatively difficult to digest. Also, we have 100,000 and more primary legal documents that aren't digitized. And they also have a giant linguistic complexity because the Greek legal language, it retains kathareusa influences, which means, as you can see in your picture here, you have those different tones that are very difficult for modern VLMs and OCR to actually transcribe them into text. And errors are very much more likely than they are in the English counterpart. Sorry, okay. So then we kind of built this architecture to try to tackle this problem specifically for the Greek domain. So we're basically getting these raw documents as a PDF, as a scan, or HTML, depending on what the law offices use or the judges use. Then we use OCR and extraction by using VLMs and fine-tuning them to the Greek language. That these VLMs basically came out around 3 months ago. The technology was there. So that's what we tried to do. And then we're basically segmenting that knowledge into different structures and creating a knowledge graph that our agentic system can focus on. And then lastly, we have the evidence first retrieval system that can reduce hallucinations and actually create a response.
Yeah, which is really like closer to an ontology RAG system rather than just the traditional RAG and graph systems we have. So
So we saw, one second. So that's our main point is that we've seen. We have all of these large documents that you've seen. And standard RAG, it's not able to handle them at such an accuracy, especially with Greek, because in English you have one token, mostly that's one word, but in Greek you have one word that's worth two or three tokens. So since you have a fixed context window all in all of those AI applications, it's much more difficult in Greek for the system to understand what is going on, especially since it's not trained on Greek data as well. So we were kind of basing on the Lost in the Middle paper that you can see on the left part of the screen, which relates to the accuracy as well. And then we tried focusing on a more evidence first ontology relationship retrieval, which is more likely as to how an actual lawyer would process these large documents. They would process them in sort of a relationship focused area rather than just only text. So yeah. And we're going to go into our first document example.
all right, so so you see this is heavily redacted because
Yeah.
from a real case, most of the data for at least the initial design of this program was from real cases. So what you're looking at here is it's a doctor's opinion that's handwritten, and it's a part of a case before the Court of Cassation. And so this, amongst other documents, would be the documents our user would upload to the platform, and then they begin the analysis. But see, even for somebody that knows Greek very well, this is a very difficult document to read. And so these large case files you saw in the beginning largely make up, apart from the motions, documents that are very difficult to read and very time consuming to read. So next we have kind of like a quick overview of our platform. So the user would log into our platform, which is usually deployed on premises for data protection reasons, because in Europe we have the whole GDPR scheme. And so we have various suites the user can use. The legal advisory, where they'll work with a specific database that either they've built or we've built, with them. And they'll retrieve knowledge just based on this specific database to avoid hallucinations. Then we have the legal drafting platform, which is something much closer to the tools that are available in the more general market today, where you will be able to base specific facts and on some facts of the case that it's retrieved with the aforementioned method. You'll be able to draft some documents. Then we have the jurisprudence suite, which is connected to another external database of the user's choice, and then it'll seek the uh, it'll seek the data through the same methods. And then we have the case intelligence suite, which is more like a graph type thing you'll see further. So the user initially creates a new case file, and then they just upload all their unstructured documents, whatever they have, and then they name it and they can classify it any way they want. This, for example, is a very simple case that I mentioned before for the uh, this specific case was they were asking for a stay of an administrative penalty before the Court of Cassation. And so here the user has uploaded a really large main document, which is a scanned file of the actual motion and their supporting documents. And so the first step we go through is through an agentic AI that is proprietary that we developed. All the ontology layer is extracted out of this set of data. And that's for two reasons. One is for the next queries of the user for the ontology retrieval augmented generation to process to work, and two is for it's also for a visual purpose, so the user can just get a gist of some of the elements maybe they've missed and things like that, and that's dynamic. So we have an agent that changes that through every different case. Then we have the legal advisor suite, which is just like I mentioned, much more closer to GPT, but it's based on the specific files the user has uploaded. So every piece of every answer is based on a specific citation from the user's uploaded documents. And also, we have added a functionality where if something isn't based on one of the facts in the document, the agent will refuse to answer that question or will answer saying that there is this isn't supported by anything and that it can't give you an accurate answer.
Mhm.
So this is we try to translate some of the queries in English so we can just kind of give you uh, so we can just demonstrate this to you. This is here the user is asking a specific question, and then it'll give out all the arguments that are present in this case. Again, we've redacted some of the parts because we can't really show it, but I think you kind of get the gist of it. Then we have the document drafting suite, where in this case the user can just ask for anything to be drafted. But what we do differently here is that one complaint that we had from many of my colleagues and judges that we know is that whenever they use artificial intelligence platforms to draft something in Greek, the wording is very awkward.
Mm.
And we assume that is because these models are trained mostly in English and in more popular languages. So we assume that it attempts to reverse engineer the Greek language, and it comes up with a result that's not very desirable. So we've allowed the user to upload select documents that they've written previously themselves. And so the model can train on this set of data, and from from that point on, it'll answer the questions using that user's preferred style. And we've also limited this to not train over all the data the user provides, because usually we want what we've heard from our colleagues is that they want to upload their most their best drafts, I guess, and they want the agent to work off of that. So here we have just a simple summary of the case. It's in Greek, so okay, that yeah, we can really translate that. We yeah, that part of the logic. And here is and here's the styling function of Draco, which we've translated some of the bits, so you can just kind of see how choose between vocabulary, sentence structure, and types of argumentation.
Uh,
Um,
yeah, and also I wanted to mention that it basically does a linguistic analysis of all of the documents that basically a user, a legal professional will provide and the user can also put comments in as to what to put or what not to put, as to make it more accurate to that specific style. Since we've seen that many also law firms, they have a specific way of writing a certain document, and that can vary between law firm and law firm.
yeah, so we wanted to really try to get that aspect. Next, we have the research suite where basically the usual research specific legal topics through their own a legal database that they've chosen. And there's also a function where another agent they'll be able to discuss with it and further answer deeper questions and then research further topics that are associated with what they began working on. And then we have that. And then yeah, so apart from giving you the answer, it'll also cite the key statutes, so you can then go do further research on your own, or you can download them and read them, or ask further questions using the research assistant. And so,
So our main question is basically how can we use AI to improve the quality of justice in a society? And since AI is moving and progressing so quickly, how can we implement that and how can we help others to do so as well, especially in fields such as law that is very much paper heavy and focused on more traditional methods. So thank you
Well,
and thank you for having
great.
us. Yeah.
Thank you so much. So yeah, if folks have any questions, you can use the chat. You can also unmute
Okay.
yourself. And I have a couple of questions already, but I will also try
Mhm.
to channel those in the chat. And folks, if you don't want to be recorded and then wind up in our YouTube channel, you should not unmute yourself. So just I was going to say that at the beginning. This is recorded, and we like to put these sessions in our YouTube channel. But anyway, so the first question, and Benjamin is like getting to the next to the same topic. Well, actually, before that, I think at the very beginning, you had me thinking that you are actually working with the judiciary in in Greece, and you are helping digitize, their inventory, and you're creating tools for them. But then it looks like the tool suite is more focused on the actual practitioners, so that they can like do RAG within their data ecosystem. So that's more like going towards like what like a Harvey or Legora would do, but just really specialized for the Greek market, which has its own kind of needs. Is that correct?
well, here's the thing. This was very interesting here. So, we started this as something that would cater exclusively to judges, and we began, discussing implementing this in one of the prosecutors' offices. But then, as we, went along, we got into Columbia University's Lab to Market Accelerator. And after just speaking with people, there was just so much overwhelming demand from practitioners that we kind of had to also kind of care for them, I guess, because yeah, there was just so much overwhelming demand that we had to address this issue. I don't
Yeah.
know if you want
Yeah,
to add anything to that.
got
No,
it,
I
got
think
it.
that is spot on. Yeah.
Yeah, super. And then you mentioned a couple of times the ontology-augmented retrieval, or sort of the ontology for the graph
Mhm.
rack, and um, and Benjamin has a question on that. Whether you're referring to the community summaries method like Microsoft's graph rack, or did you use cross entropy loss? And I don't know what that is really, but
So let
when
me.
you convert to and from the graph representation, and maybe Ben, you
So
can.
I have a bunch of open source stuff that you guys can steal whenever you feel like it. Um,
Okay.
I'm not sure how familiar you are with the Microsoft Graph Rag, but
Yeah.
Microsoft Graph Rag takes documents and then they convert the individual documents to a graph using entity triplets. And then they try to build these into graph communities. And then they summarize the graph communities. And then they take the summary of the graph communities and then vectorize the summaries of the graph communities and then use the vector search to find the entry point into the graph, which is a common method. Now, a somewhat different method is like if you want to do graph reasoning, like you're actually using the graph for your reasoning. And I used an example here where, let's say I want to have like a global knowledge graph. I take some text, let's start with sentences, and then I have an encoder. The encoder turns it into a graph with some representation. And then there's a decoder that then turns it back into language. And then I can take the cosine similarities of those two and get a cosine loss to then iteratively improve my encoder and decoder. And then I can have another loss, which is how well the knowledge graph fits into my global graph, not just for that one document, but the entire corpora, and take that as a loss to try to improve the encoder decoder, and then essentially distill from that a ontology of like an intermediate representation, sort of like how you might have assembly as like an intermediate between your high level code and your binary code that goes into your processor, right? So I wasn't really sure how you guys were doing it. Obviously it's proprietary, you don't need to tell me, but feel free to like look and cheat off of what I've been working on.
Amazing. I mean, what you're saying, it's incredibly interesting, especially with the cross entropy loss. As of now, we're mostly focused on the open source things that exist, basically.
Yeah.
And we're kind of using it because the thing with Microsoft Ontology RAG, it's you have to set specific ontologies in the beginning that are relatively set. And because this is kind of dynamic as we go with the different cases as well. So we're kind of building some other aspects with it so that it can be dynamic as it goes. But what you're saying is really interesting, and we're gonna definitely look at it.
Yeah, we haven't really looked into that.
Yeah.
That's super interesting.
All right, so there's a couple of questions that Abid has. Yeah, first of all, where are you getting the data from? You know, are you getting them from official sources?
All right, so
Yeah.
yeah, on the first question, the Supreme Court's website actually is completely open to the public, and it's very convenient if you want to scrape the judgments off of that because it just uses a enhanced Google search engine. So it was very easy to just download all the judgments from 2009 to 2026 and just use those. It's completely free. So, but the problem is that it's so far we've only trained on Supreme Court judgments and not judgments of the lower courts. And so, the solution for that is on the business to government end. If we, when we go forward with that, we're gonna have to uh, have access to the system where all the judgments are. It's done by the government they've made in the last few years, and if we want to market this product to judges and prosecutors, we're gonna have to do training on this data set. And on the private end, we feel like since we looking for more of a deployed on the client's premises model, we can train on judgments that they have acquired through their practice as well as Supreme Court judgments, and if they yeah, but we haven't really partnered with any of the of Nomos or Isocrates, like they haven't. We haven't really spoken to them yet, so but that'll be we're looking to do that in the future.
Yeah,
Okay,
and
I
we're
will
also
list this.
collaborating. Oh, sorry.
No, because there's like 5 more questions. I was going to paraphrase them quickly, but go ahead.
Okay, great.
All right.
We're also collaborating with other companies that have already a data set, and we're seeing how we can like fit into what they already have and what we need and try to plug those two things together.
Great. Actually, somebody asked if you could unshare the video so that we can see you better, I guess.
Oh,
If you
Sorry.
could unshare the
all right, we got
Yeah,
slide.
definitely.
So
Sorry.
anyway, to go back to Abid's list of questions here. So one is, what if it gets more complex with multi-party, multi-document cases in different formats? How do you handle that? 2 is how are you differentiating? There's some players in Greece apparently already which are live there. And what's your differentiator there? Like Dikaio.ai or Deeplaw.io. And then the hallucination problem. How do you think about liability if you are still with all the safeguards that you seem to have in place, if you still produce, if it's possible to produce a wrong output, and how do you think about that? Uh, and the other question is about the data flywheel. This one user, one judicial officer, maybe improve outputs by his or her use, produce improve outputs for others. And then finally, how do you think about it? It's a relatively small country. How do you build a business around that? And is this your beachhead? Are you thinking about going into Europe-wide or Southern Europe, or what's you're thinking about that? So that's a lot of questions, but yeah, if you could
First of all,
answer quickly,
those are
because we're
great
like we're
questions.
up on time quickly. So
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So, well, I would say on the, I guess on the multi-document end, we found a way to, bypass the token limit by using multiple agents, but we're not going to get too much into that. But we shouldn't have a problem in the hundreds of documents. We haven't really tested it in the, more than that, but in the hundreds of documents, we're okay. We're generally keeping the accuracy where we want it to be. So that's one thing. And then I would say differentiating from, DQAI, that's DQAI is really it's more of a tool that it's not really focused so much on, I guess, legal professionals. It's more it's a ChatGPT API plus some, Greek data. So it's catering more to a retail audience than a professional, and that's what we've gotten so far with all the interviews we've done with both judges, prosecutors, and attorneys,
On law students as well.
law students as well.
Yeah. Also for the law students, there was a question about for the liability framework.
yeah.
We're currently collaborating as well with the National School of Judges as to be able to create this and make this into something that is, has an educational component, and we really want to put this to have an educational component to this, as to be able to show the user how you can use this and how you can use this correctly and what you should and should not do.
All right. And also on the whole market size, yeah, you're right. So this is really a problem that's not just only in Greece, but it's in most civil law jurisdictions that aren't in the West, like they aren't in like Germany or Switzerland or whatnot. So Turkey has the same problem, Cyprus has the same problem, Romania has the same problem, Bulgaria has the same problem. So, this is really something that can be marketed into many markets. The Latin American market is a huge one, but we haven't really gotten into that yet. But from a preliminary understanding of it, we've seen that the same problem exists there. So, this definitely has a potential to expand a lot. But it really didn't start as a business. It really started as a research paper that went on to become a business, So,
Yeah.
Cool.
um,
That's amazing. So we're, it's very interesting. There's some, I mean, you're sort of like, I think you're sort of developing an approach, and that could be transplanted into other legal systems, that have,
Yeah,
like you said, similar
definitely.
problems. There are few, I mean, in the European context, there are some kind of legal applications that, sort of, are based on some European law that
mm,
all European countries share, right? And then you can build a business that's cross-border a little bit more easily. Like, these one company I think in Germany called Flightride, for example, they were
right.
based on the EU, and that's available everywhere. But that's still more like the exception, really. There's like not
Yeah.
many. A lot of legal tech is a little bit bound to the specific jurisdictions. But yeah, I mean, this has been great. It'd be great if you could put your email addresses into the chat so that folks
Oh,
could follow
yes.
up with
Definitely.
more. Maybe you can hang out for a little. I know it's midnight now in Greece, so we really appreciate you staying up so long. For those of you who want to meet Maria and Mikhail in person, you should come to our Future Law Conference in April, because they're planning to be out here, and you could meet them out here. But yeah, this has been great. We really appreciate you joining us, and sharing a
Thanks
little
for
bit
that.
about Draco. Please keep us posted. It's very cool.